Greetings, family, and welcome to episode number 5 of the Pure Vibes podcast. I am your host, Shaka Hiru, aka the Far Rider Fresh King, and I want to say peace, love, and greetings to everyone, and say give thanks for coming and spending this time with me on another episode of the Pure Vibes podcast show. On today's episode, we're going to be looking a little bit into history and some historical events that happened and went down. Where? No other place but in America, of course. But specifically from the Bronx, New York to Virginia. We're going to be taking a look at some historical events and some inhumane events that happened from the past. But it has a lot to do with New York and VA. So why not? Today, right here on the Pure Vibes podcast show. And today we're going to be taking a look and talking about Ota Benga. Yes, Ota Benga. If you never hear about this brother, go look him up, go and do your research. He was an African from the Congo, the pygmy, and he was brought to America, to be used as an exhibit in a zoo. How they used to take black people and put them in zoos and use them for exhibits like monkeys and apes and so on and so forth, so people could come and see the savages, they would call them, savages straight from Africa, they would call them. These people would spend their money to come to the zoo and see human savages, that they would call them, or African savages, that they would call them. Before we get into reviewing some footage on Ota Benga, let's look up some of the things they say here about Ota Benga, and we're going to check it out. Let's find out who Ota Benga was and some of the things that he went through and how he made it on his journey from Africa to America to the Bronx Zoo to Virginia, where he died. It says Ota Benga, March 20th, 1916, was a multi-Congo pygmy. He was known for being featured in an exhibit at the Louisiana Purchase Exposition in St. Louis, Missouri in 1904, and the Human Zoo exhibit in 1906 at the Bronx Zoo. Benga had been purchased from African slave traders by the missionary Samuel Phillips Verner. A businessman searching for African people for the exhibition, he accompanied Verner to the United States, later to the Bronx Zoo. Before and after, he was exhibited in a zoo's monkey house, except for a brief visit with Verner to Africa after the close of the St. Louis Fair. Benga lived in the United States, mostly in Virginia, for the rest of his life. So this is an African from the pygmy tribe of the Congo in Africa that was brought to America to be used in an exhibit in the zoo. The brother Ota Benga. So we're going to take a look at some little documentary and footage of Ota Benga and see how he made it from one place to the next and get more in depth on the history of this brother. Let's take a look.
This is the sad story of Ota Benga. 4 decades after the end of slavery in America, started the so-called Louisiana Purchase Exposition, informally known as the St. Louis World's Fair. Was an international exposition held in St. Louis, Missouri, United States, from April 30th to December 1st, 1904. It was designed for colonial nations to showcase their colonial achievements, which led to the start of Human Zoo, known as Bronx Zoo, located in New York City. This exposition led to a sad event whereby, on March 20, 1916, a 32-year-old African man named Ota Benga shot himself in the heart while being held against his will in the United States. Benga's death. Sad life was shaped by colonial avarice, justified by the quack science of eugenics. Through it all, he did what he could to keep his dignity intact, despite being subjected to the most degrading treatment imaginable. His story begins in the Congo. By the time known as the Congo Free State, the country now known as the Democratic Republic of Congo used to be a big blank spot on the map. Dense rainforest and an unnavigable river made exploration nearly impossible until the late 19th century, when King Leopold II of Belgium decided he'd quite like to have tea. He commissioned a series of expeditions to the region, including one by the famously presumed upon Dr. Livingstone, to map the terrain and get a feel for what the place was worth. Under the administration of Leopold's overseas, the Belgian Congo descended into a nightmare of whippings, amputations, forced labor, and mass killings. The situation got so bad. Even the other colonial powers complained about the way people were treated in the territory, with Britain launching an official investigation in 1903 that helped lead to some reforms. But ultimately, some estimates say that as many as 10 million Congolese were killed under Leopold. This is the misery into which Ota Benga was born. Benga was born in the Ituri forest, to the Mbuti Pygmies. His people lived in loose bands of family groups of between 15 and 20 people, moving from one temporary village or camp to another, as the seasons and hunting opportunities dictated. Benga married young, and fathered 2 children, which put him on track to start his own family, and perhaps someday lead a band himself, like the Mbuti had done for thousands of years. But that wasn't to be. Benga would never lead his own band. When he was still a teenager, the Eastern Congo erupted into a war that saw mass deportations, raids by Arab slavers. Like many colonial militias, they were corrupt. They raped and murdered villagers. Sometime in the late 1890s, soldiers found Benga's family camp and killed his entire family. He was out hunting at the time, so he only got to see the aftermath of the massacre. To a hunter-gatherer like Benga, the family is life itself. Without them, he had the choice of wandering alone until he died, or seeking out a new family group and begging them to take him on as a helper. However, aside from dying or finding a new family, fate tossed Benga a third option. A short time after losing his family, he was picked up by slave traders who put him in chains and dragged him out of the forest, which had been the only home he had ever known. They put him to work as a laborer in an agricultural village. In 1904, Benga was discovered by an American businessman and amateur explorer named Samuel Werner. Werner had been sent to the Congo on an expedition commissioned by the Louisiana Purchase Exposition, which was planning an exhibit for the St. Louis World's Fair that would educate the public in what was then a racist. Werner's job was to find some authentic African pygmies to display as missing links in human evolution. Looking at Benga, a lean, very black, very short man with teeth that had been filed into points, Werner knew he had what he needed. He bought Benga for a pound of salt and a bolt of cloth. Werner's group promptly brought Benga to St. Louis, where he was the hit of the 1904 World's Fair. He and the other captive Africans he had been lumped in with quickly figured out that the crowd wanted to see genuine African savages. In 1906, he was taken to the Bronx Zoo. There were posters around every corner of the streets about the new species brought to the zoo. The African immediately became the center of attention. He was put together with a monkey. The amount of people at the zoo doubled. Visitors were eager to see his teeth. One newspaper account, promoting Ota Benga as the only genuine African cannibal in America. They charged 5 cents to show his teeth to each. Local black people were appalled by the exhibit and demanded Benga's release, even lobbying the governor to force the zoo to shut down the display. Benga was eventually released into the custody of James Gordon, the minister who had led the charge to free him. He then went to live in Gordon's black orphanage, still unhappy with his life. Benga eventually moved to Lynchburg, Virginia, to live with friends of Gordon named the McRaes. Gordon still managed Benga's affairs. He also got Benga a job at a local tobacco plant, where he seemed to have been popular and told his story for free root beer. However, by 1914, Benga was planning a final return to Africa. Life in America, he decided, wasn't for him. With the money he made from the tobacco job, Benga started putting things in order and looking for passage to the nearest port to his homeland. But this return passage was not to be. The outbreak of World War I suspended most cross-Atlantic shipping, and the German occupation of Belgium threw the Congo into bureaucratic chaos, with nobody allowed in or out. On March 20, 1916, depressed at the thought of not being able to return home, Ota Benga shot himself in the heart.
Yeah. It seems like the brother Ota Benga been through some things, you know what I mean? Taken as a slave from Africa and brought to America to be used as a animal in the zoo, basically. He was being treated just as an animal in the zoo was being treated. He wasn't getting no better treatment than that. It was the same exact treatment. Put him in the cage with the monkeys and have people spending money to come and see him. That was ridiculous. Until the man felt so much strain, pressure, and pain, wanting to return to the motherland until he killed himself. Yeah. And when you check it, he was in the Bronx, and then they brought him to Lynchburg, Virginia, which is crazy to know, and some crazy history there. And it's said to be known that his resting place is in the White Rock Cemetery. May have to go and visit that sometime. So do your due diligence, family. Make sure you do your homework. Make sure you stay up on these topics and these people from our past and our history and our ancestors, because we need these things to keep us empowered and to keep us sharp for the future. Don't forget, My Town t-shirts on sale. You can cash at me at Elijah Farai at Cash App with your size, and I'll get them shipped out to you ASAP. Yeah, family, give thanks for coming through and checking out another episode of the Pure Vibes podcast show. This has been your host, Shaka Heru, aka the Farai the Fresh King, saying peace, love, and prosperity. Until next time. Love.